سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Jazakumullahu khairan for being here so many hours. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this heavy on our scales. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something very powerful in Surah Ad-Dhariyat, which we completed. And I want everybody to reflect upon that, especially in the context of fasting. Subhanallah. Allah states, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. Allah is making this declarative statement that the purpose of our existence is to worship. The Malaika did not understand that in the beginning. Because they even said to Allah, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We already do that kind of worship, constantly worshiping you. What's the purpose of this human being with their free will, their intellect, their desires? They could do the wrong thing. But Allah still says, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. How can the life of a human being become a life of worship? So ask yourself right now, how much of my life, my day-to-day operation, can be classified as worship versus not? And that's something that every one of us has to introspectively look like and say how much of my time I dedicate for Allah. So the first thing we think is, well, how much time I spend praying? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't want a human being praying 24/7, a salah like that. Otherwise, he would have legislated that. But you need to understand what Allah means comprehensively about worship. Fasting teaches us how a human being can spend 24/7 in an act of worship. During the daytime, what do you do? As part of the fasting, what do you do? Nothing special. What do you do when you fast? Abstention from the halal, because Allah commanded you. So obeying the command of Allah is a worship. Think about that. It's not a mere starvation. Obeying Allah is an act of worship. So ask yourself, how much of Allah do I obey during the day? And at night you have this qiyamul layl, from Taraweeh, Tahajjud. Even though you've been hungry the whole day, each of us are able to pray minimum an hour and a half after, between Isha and Taraweeh, and another hour and a half in Tahajjud. 3 hours of the night. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever prays Isha in the Jama'ah and Fajr in the Jama'ah, you get rewarded for doing what? Praying the whole night. If you make Taraweeh with the Imam and you stay with him till the end, you get the reward of the whole night. If you leave 90%, you don't get the whole reward. You gotta be greedy for reward. This is how you can spend 24 hours in an act of worship. While you're fasting during the day, it's not just the hunger and the thirst. You have to make a salah. Also, you have to watch what you say. If somebody tries to fight with you, وَإِنِّ امْرُؤٌ قَاتَلَهُ أَوْ شَاتَمَهُ فَلْيَقُلْ إِنِّي صَائِمٌ مَرَّتَيْنِ. You must discipline your tongue. وَقُلْ لِعِبَادِي يَقُولُ الَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. You don't curse anyone, you don't argue with anyone, you don't fight. Keeping the tongue away from evil is an act of worship. Keeping the eyes away of evil things is an act of worship. غَضُّ الْبَصَرِ وَكَفُّ الْأَذَى وَرُدُّ السَّلَامِ. I mean, all these things are acts of worship. How about going to work? 8 hours you're spending to work. Your niyyah can make work ibadah. When you go to work, your niyyah should be very clear that through this you will be obeying Allah. You're bringing rizq to your family. You will give a zakah and a sadaqah. You'll help and you will stay away from things that are haram. That niyyah can make a job an act of worship. And while you work, when the employer wants you to do haram things, you avoid them. When the employer is backbiting others, you avoid them. See, this is how a human being can transform 24 hours into just worship. And most of that worship is not something you do actively, it's just from the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Our worship is different than the worship of the angels. They can do perpetual salah. وَهُمْ لَا يَسْأَمُونَ. They don't get any tired. They can make sajda for eternity. Subhanallah. That's not what Allah wanted. Allah made the human being the equal opposite of a malak. Weaker in every way. But we have a heart to continue worshiping Allah when we have the excuse of the weakness that we suffer because of fasting. And that's what Allah demonstrates to the angels. The human being has a will to keep on going. Look at the will of the people of Gaza. They're still making salah, even when everything is demolished around them. They're still fasting, those who can. The human spirit is unbelievable. And you need to channel that in your worship of Allah. That's why I urge everybody, build our future. You have to dedicate your life to it, and it can become an act of worship. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. When you left a legacy that is worship for thousands of people, you'll find that Yawm al-Qiyamah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept that from us. Come Saturday and impress Allah with your good deeds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us all our fasting and qiyam. ربنا تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا وقراءتنا للقرآن. اللهم اكتبنا من الذين صام رمضان وقامه إيمانا واحتسابا. اللهم اجعلنا من الشاهدين ليلة القدر يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أعتق رقابنا من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا واعف عن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منا والأموات فإنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وانصر الإسلام والمسلمين واغفر لجميع موتى المسلمين يا عزيز يا كريم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وجزاكم الله خيرا. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله